we're here this evening with Howard Beckett. Welcome to everyone who's joining us on the Canaries Facebook page tonight. It's really great to have you all. We're here to discuss a really exciting campaign that Howard is running currently to achieve nomination to be General Secretary of the Unite Union. Howard, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kerry.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I should also say before we kick off, Howard is taking questions tonight. So if you knock your questions into the Facebook comment section under the screen that you're watching currently, we'll be picking up those questions and I'll ask as many of them as I can at the end. Obviously, time permitting. We've got to let Howard go at some point, guys. So Howard, do you want to tell us, conscious we're going to have a mixed group of people on this meeting tonight. Tell us a bit about Unite.
Well, Unite is the largest paying union in the UK. So we have about 1.4 members in total, over 1.1 million paying members. We stretch across every single sector of the United Kingdom. And we stretch across every single nation of the British Isles. So we are the only union to have membership in the south of Ireland, the north of Ireland. And then we have membership in Wales, Scotland, and England, across 7 different regions. So yes, we're very large, and obviously we're also the largest affiliate to the Labour Party, Kerry. So we've affiliated about 500,000 of our members to the Labour Party, which makes us by quite a distance the largest affiliate to the Labour Party. So we're a force for good in society, Kerry.
That's for sure. I can tell you that. You just got to look at this man's CV and you're like, Jesus wept. And you've also got a seat on the Labour National Executive Committee, right?
Personally, I do, yes. I sit for the union on the National Executive Committee. There's two of us who sit in the National Executive Committee. Jane Taylor is the vice chair, is the other seat. And then also Diana Hollins is the treasurer for the Labour Party. And yes, I've got a seat on the NEC at the moment. It's an interesting time on the NEC. It's very frustrating, I have to say, at times. But I keep on going on, Gary, thinking that I won't have much to say because you sort of know the way that the vote is going to go at the moment in the NEC because the right have the majority. So you think, what is the point in saying anything? But inevitably you do say quite a bit because you become frustrated with what you're hearing. Yeah.
And I think that's the point really of this, isn't it? That the left fight back has to happen everywhere. And, having that voice, in the NEC, as frustrating as it is, thank goodness there are people like you who are willing to do that job and keep those voices loud and active.
Well, the left does have to fight back. The left has to obviously unify. That's the very first step, massively important. And anyone who's watching at the moment, I would plead to them to unify. Let's get one less slate going into the NEC, and we have to organise ourselves going into conference. The discussions that have been happening previously, where unions sit with Chulo and unions have discussions amongst themselves, many of whom simply don't share the politics of Unite, or some of whom needs to go with. This is a battle between left and right within the Labour Party now. It's a battle for the soul of the Labour Party, and we need to win the arguments.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's ever been more important than it is right now. With everything that we're going through, this is the time that the left needs to be getting together and doing as much as we can. So I guess I wanted to ask you, you're currently Assistant General Secretary at Unite. Can you tell people a bit about, what does the Assistant General do and what have you achieved in the past few years?
Well, each Assistant General Secretary within Unite looks after various departments or sectors, and maybe a bit of both. I look after legals, was the first department that I looked after whenever I went into Unite. But obviously, whenever I spent some time in the West Midlands as the regional secretary, and whenever I came back from the West Midlands, my portfolio, if you like, within Unite changed quite considerably. Okay. So I also am responsible for politics. I'm responsible for membership. I'm also responsible for the youth sector. I'm responsible for the oil and gas sector, and I'm responsible for the services sector. And in addition to that, sadly, our finance director passed away not that long ago, and I've taken over responsibilities for the finance department. So at the moment, it's a wide portfolio, obviously a difficult one at this moment of crisis. But I'm very privileged to be in the position that I am, able to help people.
And also, because Howard is extraordinarily humble, I should say my experience of Howard has been, it's really interesting over the past couple of years of seeing someone who is so active in terms of providing moral and practical support, from industries through to individual, members and activists. It really is extraordinary to know that there are people like you actually working inside of these systems and providing that kind of cover and backup when it's necessary, because it can feel pretty lonely when you're going up against the system in whatever way that kind of materializes in a moment.
That's very kind of you, that Kerry. The heroes in the trade union movement are the volunteers, our reps in the workplace. They are the heroes. They're at the sharp end, and my goodness, at this moment in time, are they experiencing the problems at the sharp end with what's going on with potential job losses and the slashing of terms and conditions? I do like to think that I'm always there to fight on behalf of members and do whatever I can to help members. But at the end of the day, I'm paid for my job. I'm fortunate to be paid for the position I'm in. The volunteers who are in our workplaces, they are the real heroes of the trade union movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have the last couple of years looked like for you? What have been the big battles that you've been facing, and how do you feel they've gone?
Well, I suppose, my time in the trade union and Unite changed considerably whenever Jared Coyne challenged Lenny in the last election, Len McCluskey in the last election. We came close to losing the union to the right wing, incredibly so, considering the legacy and achievements of Len. But we did come unbelievably close to losing the union. We were challenged in after that election in the certification office by Jared Coyne. I obviously was responsible for defending the union in respect of that, and we were successful. I moved into the West Midlands to look after the West Midlands, and it gave me a different perspective on the union. It gave me a different perspective on the structure of the union. Head office is a very different environment than a region is, and I saw that, in my view, that the success of a trade union is really fundamental about being in the regions and the nations and being successful in the regions and nations. And then I was very privileged to be at the forefront of the Birmingham Bins dispute. In fact, we had two disputes shortly afterwards. We had one dispute which was over the disgraceful cutting to terms and conditions of those who could least afford it in the name of austerity, and incredibly by a Labour council. And then having settled that dispute, we then found out that the same Labour council had paid bonuses to people who had not taken strike action, and we found ourselves back in another dispute with them. So those were two incredible disputes that lasted for months and really shaped my time in the West Midlands, and got a great deal of time for the West Midlands Waste Service, I can say that, and it has formed a lot of my views in respect of politics, I can tell you that as well, Kerry.
I think you make good points there. I mean, I know there'll be people listening who are going, wait, there are right-wing union people? How's this? And I mean, I know some of us kind of got a lesson in that in terms of the Labour leaks, the Labour report, in seeing the levels of kind of collaboration going on between right-wing union members and, senior union people with the sort of anti-Corbyn project. So it really is an issue for everyone, whether you're a union member, you're not a union member, you're a general lefty, to get involved in these fights, because, as we say, we need to fight this on all fronts now. Part of the reason we are where we are is because neoliberals knew that lesson. And they've got themselves everywhere, in positions of power where they can effect the kind of change they want to. And it's just great to see the left mobilizing and realizing that if we want to make change, we need to do the same. It has to be a broad battlefront. So I guess the logical question most people are going to want to know is that, what's your background? Where did you grow up? What influenced you to get involved with the trade union movement?
Yeah, just on the point that you raised before, Kerry, and I'll talk about my own background. You're quite right that, the time now is for everybody to get in a trade union.
Yeah.
It is incredible that it's only really at times of crisis. Those can be personal crisis, or they can be collective crisis, or they can be a society crisis. But at times of crisis, people really look to trade unions to see what they can offer. And now is a time for people to be looking to trade unions to see what we can offer, because it is only going to be trade unions that will make the arguments for protecting jobs. That's clear to me. It is only going to be left trade unions who will stand up and say the starting position is not that people should lose their jobs, and the starting position is not that people should pay for this crisis with austerity. So I would say to everybody who's watching out there who is not a member of a union, that we have rates and membership scales for everybody in society. Our community membership is completely unique within the trade union movement, where people can join our union, be part of our family, have their voice heard, realise the strength of the collective. And then we have low paid rates, apprenticeship rates, and our basic rates. So people, everybody who's watching, Kerry, I would say to them, please go on to unitetheunion.org/join and join a union and have your voice heard, get active and have your voice heard. We are strong by numbers, and if people join us, then we have a better chance of creating a better society for everyone. My own personal, sorry, Kerry, that was quite long, and I know you didn't ask me that question.
It's a really important point. I think it needs to be made. I think just before I let you go into background, I actually wanted to, as I understand it, you can also become a member of Unite if you're working in the voluntary or third sector, or even if you're doing unpaid work. Like there are lots of people who are unpaid carers, you know, that and they have actually able to get membership with Unite. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Everybody can gain membership of Unite. And obviously we have to adapt now. We've got a responsibility as part of what I'm saying, and my message to those in respect of any future General Secretary election is that we have to be fleet of foot and offer membership for young people, the gig economy, the voluntary sector. We have to protect people, and that to protect people, we need strength in numbers, and it's why we cannot afford to lose members. Unite is a strong financial union. We can afford to lose finance, but we cannot afford to lose members, because it's only in the strength of numbers that our voice matters in society. So yes, our community membership, Kerry, for anyone who is unemployed or finds themselves in the voluntary sector, just go onto our website and you'll see that there is a membership for you, and you'll see how affordable it is.
Brilliant. Okay, so now about you. Where'd you start off?
Well, yeah, I do find this quite difficult, actually. It's never easy talking about yourself. I said recently that I accepted as part of the territory whenever you put your name forward for a senior position, but it doesn't make it any more comfortable. No. Yes, I was born in Northern Ireland, Kerry. My mother, I suppose one lie that is out there in the right-wing press is that they have my mother in a Magdalene laundrette now, and that's not quite the truth. She certainly had her difficulties with nuns during her schooling, and it is true that as a very young woman, she escaped that environment, as I would definitely see it, to go to London. But I use escape in the loosest of terms. She went to London to be a district nurse. Met my father. They got married in '68. My father was a clerk and was able to transfer back to Northern Ireland. He was from London, is from London. And they moved to Northern Ireland, sorry, in '68. And I was born in '69 at the start of the Troubles.
Wow.
And that's where I suppose you learn your political, you learn your politics from, because society does dictate what you are as a person, and the Troubles dictated certainly my politics as a person.
Yeah, I'm always stunned to actually see the number of people on the left and sort of activist community as well, more broadly, who have experienced trauma. You know, they've been in difficult situations, be they personally traumatic, politically traumatic. I mean, it all adds up to the same thing at the end of the day, and have actually taken those experiences and turned them into sort of rocket fuel, you know, which sort of propels them forward to really try and prevent other people having those kinds of painful experiences.
Yeah, and that's definitely true of growing up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. The Troubles in Northern Ireland dictates a person, and that's across the board. There's no one who is untouched by the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I lost friends during the Troubles, and I lost friends after the Troubles who were mentally scarred as a result of it. And it dictates your politics. The press have correctly reported that I disavow of any religion and believe instead in socialism. That is very much correct. And that was dictated to me by my parents, who did not believe in religious education. But in the context of Northern Ireland, that was very difficult. You were going to schools that were saying that they were state schools, but in reality, they had a religious context to them, and sectarianism was a daily event in your life. And you either crumbled under that, or you found an alternative. And it was only the politics of trade unionism, and at a particular time, the ATGWU was very active in Northern Ireland, very active as part of the civil rights marches. And it was only through trade unionism that you could talk about socialism instead of sectarian divides. And it was only with the trade union movement that you could accept the reality that every worker, being a Catholic or Protestant, had the same class issues, regardless of which part of Northern Ireland they themselves lived in. And that was very much my experience, and dictated my politics, and dictates my commitment to the trade union movement.
And your background is in law.
It is. I was very fortunate to get a law degree, coming out of the circumstances. As I say, two parents who I don't know if they're watching tonight, but if they are, I'd send them my love.
Hello, Howard's parents.
My mum is an incredible woman. She was a district nurse in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, in the most difficult of areas, areas that were traditionally unionist areas, and she obviously had a very Southern Irish accent, and incredibly brave. And yes, they pushed me to get a law degree. I think if you were talking to my father, he would claim credit for having got me out of Northern Ireland before I got far too involved in the politics of Northern Ireland. And I think in hindsight, he was right to say, get out. And I went to Newcastle University and got a law degree at Newcastle University, and then went on to practice in law before ending up in the trade union.
Fantastic. So why are you running for General Secretary? I know this is the first bit because we've got to secure the nomination first, but why is this important to you? Why do you want to do this?
Well, firstly, I'm running to be the United Left candidate in the General Secretary election, and that's very important for me, and it's very important for me to say. I would not go on a ballot paper without having a unified left behind me. This union is a force for good in society, and I have absolutely no doubt that the right wing are looking at the leadership of Unite and thinking, can we win that leadership? And the more left candidates who appear in a ballot paper, the more likely the right wing is to come through the middle and end up winning the Unite's leadership. And much more important than who the person is or the personality of the person who's General Secretary is that this union remains firmly on the left and continues to drive the left agenda that we have driven under Len's tenure so well. Why am I running? I suppose it would be false modesty to say anything other than the fact that I think I am the best candidate. That's, again, that's not an easy thing to say, but I do think I'm a candidate of unity. I think it's very important whenever you're putting yourself forward for a position such as this, that you're doing it because other people want you to do it. You have to be inclusive. It's a cohesive position. When you are the General Secretary of an organization the size of Unite, you have to be able to run it with the acceptance and agreement of everybody around you. They must want you to be General Secretary. So obviously some very important comrades and people who I have a lot of time for and I respect greatly asked me and talked to me about putting my name forward, and I have. I then feel that I have a vision for Unite Kerry going forward. I think I have a clear agenda in respect of where Unite should go, and that is fundamentally premised on regional strength, fighting for members, standing up to the right wing, whether or not that be in the Labour Party or outside of the Labour Party, fighting for members on a daily basis, making sure that no struggle is too big or too small for Unite to step into. We are an enormous organisation, and and the trade union movement is an enormous movement. And I think sometimes we need reminding of our collective strength. And if we really believe in ourselves, what can we do? And we see it now with coronavirus. We see it at this moment in crisis. Do we have the bravery to step forward and offer the alternatives and demand the alternatives, or do we let the neoliberals of the establishment get away with working people paying for this crisis?
Absolutely. And I think you touched on an interesting point there about the fact that, Unite and obviously other unions are working constantly, day in, day out, in these struggles, in workplaces all over the four nations that make up the United Kingdom. That work is happening all the time. But we don't hear much about it because we don't have, in this country, unfortunately, a kind of a mainstream media that is at all interested really in kind of promoting ideas of collectivism. We have a very individualistic culture.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Kerry, and it is the reason why it's a responsibility of unions to support the likes of yourselves, Canary, and other channels that are trying to reach out to people and say that there is an alternative way. It is. I've used this quote recently on a couple of occasions. So anyone who's watched me and listened to it, I apologize. But whenever I was researching for an NHS event, and I came across a quote from Bevan that the real skill of the Conservatives is to persuade the poor that they should keep the wealthy in power so as they remain poor. And it is the truth of conservatism, and it relies upon mainstream media. We've seen that with Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen how they reacted to almost losing the establishment in 2017. Yeah. We saw the vitriol, the way that they attacked Jeremy relentlessly. They obviously had a strategy of saying very clearly that whatever Jeremy's good points were, we must attack them and make them into the negative. So a man who was trusted, a man who was thought of as being anti-racist, a man who was for good in society, was turned into a spy, an anti-Semite. It's ludicrous things right up to the election day, whenever, if you recollect, Kerry, we had posters saying, "Would you trust this man with your children?" Disgraceful stuff. And it is only
outrageous.
And it is the mainstream media that propagate it. So it is the responsibility of the trade union movement with our size to support yourselves, to make sure that messages get out, and to be much more ambitious. I've said a number of times, and I've put it in a manifesto, that I would like to see Unite fund a YouTube channel that would be completely different for our movement and would attract millions of people and would exist on all sorts of levels for activists, for young people, for political people, and would talk to people about everything that is going on in society at the moment.
It's such an exciting project. And I think even you being here this evening, I think is you living those values that you're talking about already. This is before you've even had the hustings, before that stuff has moved forward. You're here actually already delivering on that promise of engaging with New Left media and actually realizing the power that can exist, if we create our own platforms rather than continuing to fight our way onto, platforms that obviously will always go on those platforms because we need to keep doing that. But to pretend like they're suddenly going to turn around and support socialist candidates in any scenario, I think has been pretty much proven.
Well, they're not, are they? They're never going to. And we only have to think about the people who are interviewing people. The harsh reality every time someone is on mainstream media is that they are fighting against the journalist. They are fighting against the person who is literally interrogating them. Because of that person's preconceived agenda and background themselves. And, I suppose, I would be tempted if I was being interviewed by mainstream media to be asking the journalists some questions about their own preconceived ideas in regard to issues that they're raising towards us. But there is an alternative way. And Jeremy showed that there is an alternative way. And what he opened up, we have a responsibility to continue. I'm obviously nervous about Saturday and whether or not I win, but I did want this campaign regardless in order to be able to talk about these issues and to be able to say the trade union movement has to now embrace everything that was good about the Corbyn project and say, right, we can own this. We can deliver something fresh. We can engage it with young people. We can show that there is an alternative opposition in society, and we can show that we're the home for you to come together and believe in hope in a better future.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make the point well, our power is in our numbers. Our power is in our labor. Working class power is in its labor. We run the country. We drive the trains, we heal the sick, we dig out the coal, everything that is really significant. And I think that was flagged, you know, with bells on, with the coronavirus, because who were the essential workers?
With bells on. But we cannot afford to lose that narrative. That's
Yeah.
what's key coming out of this. You know, in the 2008 financial crisis, we didn't so much as get the Robin Hood tax. So the spids and speculators had taken the country to the edge of total oblivion financially, and were bailed out, and they couldn't even give society the Robin Hood tax in recompense. Well, the difference then obviously was that people were not talking in terms of essential workers, key workers, being a trade union. There wasn't a light that was shone in the fact that bad working environments, bad working habits meant that you were more likely to be at risk from coronavirus. There wasn't, none of those issues were shone a light on. And our responsibility now is to make sure that we do not lose that opportunity, that we do not just reverse to normal, accept the narrative of redundancies, that we actually take the different narrative and say, no, there is an alternative in society. Look, it's happening over here, it's happening over here, it's happening here. These are the countries that are doing something different, and it's about time we did something different in this country.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are really on the verge of something here, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm noticing some serious parallels here between the sort of the interwar period at the beginning of the 20th century, and the sort of the failure of the working class really to fully galvanize and get itself in gear. Then we had World War II, and then we had a dramatic, you know, socialist it's a revolution really in the United Kingdom. You wouldn't have thought, you know, you look at Churchill's popularity at the 1945, you know, we've won the war, and we voted him out, you know,
well,
and we redrew the social contract.
You couldn't be more correct. And this is the reason why Labour has to be so much more ambitious about what it asks for, and so much more vocal in respect of its message, because you couldn't be more right, Kerry. In 1945, the debt to GDP was at 3 times the level as it is today. And who would have thought in the late 1930s about a welfare state? Who would have thought about the nationalisation of the mines? Who would have thought about second-tier education? Who would have thought about working class people ever getting to university? But all of that became a reality overnight to people, because they refused to accept that they came back from war and went back to what they had before. And this is a time where working people need to say exactly the same thing. We're not returning to 0-hour contracts. We're not returning to precarious work. We're not accepting redundancies. We're not accepting that there is no money there for pay increases, because you've proven that there is. So let's have an adult conversation about how we reboot society, but in a way that is good for working people.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move on to your manifesto, which I have to say is the thing I believe that really distinguishes you from the other candidate, who's Steve Turner. What struck me about this is it's radical, but more than that, it's panoramic in scale. You know, this is really about knitting together the entire working class. There's internationalism. You know, you conceive of the working class not just as the white working class, but as the white working class, the black working class, the brown working class, the LGBTQI working class. You know, all of these people are welcome and equal from your point of view. And I wish it wasn't the case that was, you know, something even worthy of note, to be honest. But, you know, we live in a country in which racism is still an endemic issue. And obviously we saw you unapologetically and proudly pledging your support for Black Lives Matter, which, you know, means a lot to me. Just in case anyone doesn't know, I'm the granddaughter of a Windrush migrant to the UK. So my granddad came here from Dominica at that Windrush period. And, you know, people of colour, there's a sort of almost a nervousness about unions and about collective bargaining. It was obviously born of that period of time. I'm a Bristolian, as you may be able to tell from this lovely regional accent of mine. And, you know, when my granddad and his mates, you know, were trying to get jobs, you know, we had labour councils endorsing colour bars, and colour bars are basically where, you know, you get together and go, no one's going to hire any people of colour, basically. That's it. We only employ white people here. And we even saw some unions getting involved, and we had a big incident in Bristol called, you know, Bristol bus boycott, I'm sure you're aware of, where you saw the sort of the tools of collectivism, being used not against the higher ups, not against an exploitative, moneyed class, but actually against fellow working class people who were had a different color skin. So, when you make these statements and when you adopt these positions and make these commitments, it really does resonate with people, because I think we do need really to have that focus now on knitting the working class back together, because it has been deliberately, divided. You can see what happened in the aftermath of, Jeremy's defeat back in December, and some blue Labour stuff kicking off, and we need to go back to being traditional white working class focused. I just wondered if you could speak a little to that for people. Why is that important to you to have one working class, and how do you see yourself kind of moving forward, knitting those people back together?
Well, you certainly go back to your background, don't you? My mother was in London during a time whenever there were signs up in doorways telling people who are black or ethnic minorities or Irish or dogs that they weren't welcome, which is just extraordinary. I grew up in a society that was sectarian. I don't compare racism to sectarianism, because the reality of racism is the centuries and centuries of slavery that have caused black people to be so disenfranchised in society, and there is a responsibility to address that. But because of my background, I've always instinctively been an anti-racist campaigner. I've been fortunate enough to be the lead for the union with Show Racism the Red Card for the last 10 years. Straight away from entering into the union, I took that position. And that's been an incredible privilege. And for any of your viewers who are not aware of Show Racism the Red Card, I would ask them to please become aware and think about how they can support that charity, because it is completely reliant at the moment on trade union funds and right. personal donations. And Show Racism the Red Card is not a charity about racism within football. It's a charity that uses the medium of football to connect with young people, and so educate young people that racism is a disease, and a disease that you do not have to follow. And that's incredibly important. But the trade union movement, if I'm being honest, has more to do. Whenever I was in the regional secretary in the West Midlands, I specifically was looking for BAME officers to represent the demographics of our membership within the West Midlands, because that should be our responsibility. There could be no excuse for our officer corps not representing the demographics of our union. But I say no excuse. That is difficult whenever workplaces can be inherently racist, and then as a result of that, people do not get the opportunity to put themselves forward. And by inherently racist, I mean employers who have underlying issues themselves. But in the West Midlands, during my time in the West Midlands, a young black and ethnic minority man became the regional secretary of our union. Not just the first youth member to be a regional secretary, but the first BAME member to be a regional chair of our union, and not just Unite, but of all of our predecessor unions. And that does say something. So I've looked at the Black Lives Matter, and I think that there is so much opportunity for unions. There is an energy there. There is, that we have a responsibility to take into workplaces to talk about the Black Lives Matters movement, how important it is within our own workplaces, a responsibility to make sure that we get the champions of black and ethnic minority groups to step forward and say, I'm a worker and I want to represent workers and I can do it. And it is that we have a responsibility for. But obviously, it is an international struggle, and it is incredible the way Black Matters Lives has shown the international struggle of workers. Because I am in no doubt personally, Kerry, I know people have academic debates about it, but I have no doubt that it is a class struggle. I have no doubt that the elite want to keep black people of color, as you say, in their place in the same way as they want to keep workers in their place. And it is a struggle of class. And the trade union movement has such an opportunity to address that and say it will not be accepted in our workplaces, not accepted in our communities, and we'll address it. And that's what I hope my manifesto commitments give pledges to. I don't like pledges in this in the current context, but
Yeah.
I hope the manifesto gives a narrative that people will accept in respect of that, and I hope people will look at my track record in regard to issues of anti-racism and know that I intend to deliver on those commitments.
Fantastic. And I also wanted to talk about political education, because this I think is a central issue right now. I think there is a chronic lack of political education broadly in our country. You know, people are largely unaware of their history, and the history that they have been taught is a history of rich white men galloping across the world, killing people, basically, and reframed in a positive way. And I guess it was interesting because obviously if you don't have those tools, if you aren't aware of your history, if you aren't aware of the battles of the past and how they were won, and if you don't know how unions work, and if you don't know how as a working class person you can engage in politics and make change happen, you can kind of get stuck on the periphery, really, you know, sat at home frustrated, you know, but not also at the same time feeling impotent, you know, like you're just passively watching this battle happen. So to see you talking about political education is, I think, a really great sign that you understand that issue, and you understand that, you know, without engaging people and without bringing people's level of education and literacy up, you know, we're all going to be less effective at what we do.
Yes, and let me just, before I move on to that, Kerry, let me just touch on education generally and on the issue of anti-racism and Black Lives Matters and the importance of decolonializing our education and what that actually means. It is extraordinary that we do not have an anti-racist agenda in the school's curriculum. Absolutely incredible, considering the history of this country. Absolutely outrageous. And it is also extraordinary, and this is true even of the last Labour Party manifesto and the one before, that issues of equality were confused with issues of anti-racism and the history of anti-racism and why it's so important to tackle that. And I will, if you know, if I was ever fortunate enough to be General Secretary, I would insist that the Labour Party have an anti-racist agenda forced into the curriculum of schools if they want Unite's money. There can not be any doubt in respect of that the issue of anti-racism has to be in school agendas. The reason why Show Racism the Red Card does so much is because of such a gap that there is on school education. On our own education going forward, yes, it is, you know, traditionally whenever workplaces were based in communities and in the way that they were back in the 70s, of course, we educated communities. You know, I know plenty of shop stewards and conveners who fought against the BNP in the Northwest and educated their communities against the disease of racism, and they did so incredibly well. But the structures were so different. Now we have to move forward with an education structure that deals with the issue of anti-racism, but also deals with politicizing our people. And that means the connection of industrial education, community, and political. That means understanding the responsibility and the connection between all of them. I have two anecdotes, I suppose, Kerry, that I give to people in respect of this. The first is that I say that Birmingham Bins will be in perpetual dispute with Birmingham City Council until such time as we unite, find a refuge worker who wants to be the councillor for waste and understands that you cannot continue to work out on the refuge service. The second is, because I've been told this myself by some of the wealthiest people in the world, that workers can afford to swallow inflation. And we need workers to understand that the reason why bosses will tell them that, people who are billions of pounds will tell people on 35,000 to swallow inflation, is because of the political society that we live in. Those connections between what happens in your industrial workplace and what happens in politics are integral to each other. And that's the responsibility of a union, is to make sure people understand why they're in dispute. So I'm saying very clearly, for example, that those members of ours who find themselves in industrial disputes should immediately find themselves in our political schools, as soon as they understand why that dispute has come about. They understand the class issues that exist in society. I always felt, Kerry, this is a slight anecdote, But whenever I came from Northern Ireland, to university at Newcastle, and it was very different in those days. It was a day's boat trip to Stranraer, and then a half a day's train trip. As soon as I got to university in Newcastle, I felt that the class divide that existed between public and private school educated students was more obvious than the sectarianism that existed in Northern Ireland. Wow. And it's those class issues that still permeate through our society now, and it's only the trade union movement that can tackle them.
Absolutely. And an interesting topic, and obviously I've seen a tweet from you in the last couple of days, actually, which was sort of really throwing down the gauntlet to both Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, that you were not willing to tolerate working class people paying for the coronavirus crisis in the same way that we've already seen working class people pay for the financial crisis in 2000, still paying, frankly. So you've laid your stall out pretty clearly that, you know, you are a socialist, you believe in socialist values, and you will fight for those against whoever you need to fight to make them alive. Could you just sort of speak a little more to that? Kind of where do you see these fissures opening now between the sort of the left, the broad left, the socialist movement, and where Keir Starmer is leading the Labour Party? Where are the fault lines opening for you at the moment?
Well, I'm worried, and I suppose anybody who's been following my public Twitter knows that I'm worried and knows that I've decided on a particular approach to that. Kerry, if I take you back to the Birmingham bins dispute that I was involved in, it never entered my head for a second that because that was a Labour council, that we would not stand up and fight for our members against what was a disgusting idea of reducing wages from 19,000 to 15, 16,000 and working people pay for it. It was unbelievable to me that the Labour Council could ever have contemplated that, much less get it through, much less push it through. It was just amazing. So it never crossed my mind to be in any way less aggressive, if you like, or less critical of them because they were wearing the red colours of Labour. I was very vocal in saying that you only get the badge of Labour if you're representing Labour values, and in Unite's book, that's a simple reality is that you are simply a bad employer in those circumstances, and we will stand up to you. And I suppose take that forward to now, it is Labour values that I want to see. The reality is that Labour needs to be vocal. It needs to be a voice for an alternative. It needs to offer those things. Leadership is about more than question time. It is about more than PMQs. You know, I expect Keir Starmer to win PMQs. His training gives him that advantage. He is up against a bumbling buffoon who doesn't prepare at all. So that's the easy one. That's the first tick box for Keir Starmer to win on that. The second tick box is to believe it, to make people such as myself believe that you're a man of unity across Labour, but more importantly, the members of Unite, to believe that you are about unity, to speak to the left, that that's what you stood on. The third important issue is to say to people, I stood on a platform that was a left platform, which he did, and I will commit to that left platform. And then I suppose for me, the biggest challenge is whenever you're in a moment of crisis, it isn't leadership to watch the other party fail and to wait for them to make mistakes and to see what comes about. It is leadership to offer an alternative, a vocal alternative. Now, obviously, I could talk for an hour about the mistakes I think have been made, about the fact that I think that there has not been enough concentration on the content of the leaked report, about how I feel that the reported settlement of defamation cases is wrong, about the fact that the NEC is voting en bloc as a right at the moment. I could talk about these things all the time. But the reality for me right now, and the reality for Unite right now, is that we have members losing their jobs by the thousands, and they expect leadership. I want to see Keir Starmer down the picket lines at Tower Hamlet. I want to see him visiting Heathrow. I don't, not for photo shoots, but to tell those members who are losing their jobs that he will stand up for them and do whatever it takes. And I don't want to feel that I have to constantly force people to do that. I want people to feel that inside themselves, to feel the injustice and respond to it instinctively.
Awesome. Okay, so if you would be happy to oblige, I'm going to ask you a few questions now.
Of course.
These are coming from our Facebook page, so I'm going to give people's names. So firstly, we have Dana Cooney, who asks, what are Howard's thoughts on the Labour Party using members' subscriptions to pay off the false anti-Semitism accusations? Now lawyers have claimed Labour could win the cases.
Well, I referenced it. I don't approve at all. I will be making my position clear at the NEC in respect of that. There are a number of aspects with this that leave me incredibly uncomfortable. The first is, what is the legal advice? Because on the premise that the legal advice is being reported is that Labour would win these cases, then Labour has a responsibility to fight these cases, not least to protect its own reputation, but also because of the message that it gives to anybody else who wants to attack Labour. I have a problem with it being widely reported that they're being settled for political reasons, because the politics of allowing people to accuse the Labour Party of these things is far more important than the politics of settlement. I have a problem if it's been reported that Keir made that promise during a campaign, and therefore effectively there is an open checkbook to give people compensation because of a commitment that was made in a campaign before you'd seen any legal advice. I have a problem with that. And then lastly, I have a problem because it's been widely reported to me that some of these individuals are named in the leaked report as acting against a Corbyn victory in 2017, and as having come out with commentary in the workplace that frankly would lead to a dismissal. And I wonder what is going to happen here if the Ford report returns findings that say that these people, because of their conduct in that leaked report, should be expelled from the Labour Party. And then the wider membership is looking at us having paid compensation to them. So I see this as a problem, and there will be questions that will have to be answered by the Labour leadership. They cannot expect to do something like this and for it just to go away. It is the money of Unite members and other trade union members that is paid into the Labour Party, and it has to be used correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, it does just seem absolutely kind of, just bonkers that you would have members being, members effectively paying compensation to people who spent the last 4.5 years attacking them. It's just unbelievable.
And Kerry, can I just say that, as I understand it, proceedings were never issued against the Labour Party. This was something that was done on the eve of the limitations period for when proceedings needed to be issued. So I don't even know if anybody ever saw a formalized pleading in respect of this case. So it's extraordinary to me that this has happened in this way, and I wish it hadn't.
No, brilliant. Thank you for that. And I think it's good that we've got, unions fighting this. I know New Left Media is united on this issue. We'll be releasing a number of our own investigations in the coming weeks on this issue. And so I think with that comprehensively answered, we can take a look at the next question, which comes from Jan Bennett. And Jan says, thank you so much for everything you've done for the left. But can I just ask what you've done to help fight against the witch hunt, purge of left-wing Labour members, and what the rest of us can also do to fight it? So before Howard answers, I can attest to this as a personal witness. I know which side of this battle Howard was on. I know the moral and practical support that he extended to people during what was an incredibly difficult period of time for a lot of Unite members, Labour members, and all sorts of us, even people like us working at the Canary, faced down these battles, and we did them with you by our side. So I know you're uncomfortable sometimes, Howard. You get a bit humble. I wanted to make that clear that I know this to be true, so that Howard can then answer the question, having had a bit of an intro and backup.
Well, thank you very much for the intro and backup. Maybe I should leave the answer as your answer. No, the reality is that everything that is now happens, in my view, should be read in the context of that leaked report. It is the content of that leaked report that goes to the core of everything that has been going on in the Labour Party, obviously under the leadership of Ian McNicol and Emily Oldknow, but it is the content of that report that should lead everybody to question the narrative that has been given out there in mainstream media. At that report, and I hope, and I don't know if those involved in the investigation inquiry will be listening, but it is the content of that report that is the focus. For me, the issue in respect of who leaked it, I'm not sure I care. The reality of it is that Labour will go through their own investigation in respect of that. They should be doing that on a HR position, not in respect of a wider NEC investigation. In my view, there's complete overlap and double jeopardy in respect of what people are dealing with. If there is a data protection issue, and I'm not sure to what extent there is a data protection issue, it's not been made clear, that should be dealt with by a data protection officer. The NEC inquiry should focus on the content of that report. Unite gave millions of pounds to try and achieve a Corbyn government in 2017. People who cannot have, that money does not get spent easily. And then a report comes out where clearly people have been working against a Labour victory. Everything that has happened needs to be read in the context of that report.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth reminding people, Corbyn's Labour came within 2,200 votes of winning the 2017 general election. 2,200. So, when we're talking about these internal machinations and people working against the party, it mattered. It could have made the difference. We could have had, we could be 4 years in, 3 years in to a socialist government.
Exactly.
We could have had that work underway. Yeah.
Yep. It would have changed absolutely everything. I'll tell you what, Kerry, if we were sitting with a Jeremy Corbyn socialist government right now at a time of crisis, dealing with coronavirus crisis, we wouldn't be having a debate about slots and such like in respect to British Airways. We'd have a Labour government saying very clearly we'll nationalise before anything else. That's what was up for stakes whenever we were talking about a Jeremy Corbyn government. We were talking about socialism in our country, and people worked against it. And as you say, we were less than 2,500 votes short. So it's not as if it was some type of de minimis impact of these people working against. And it does make my blood curl at the thought of some of them having been compensated by the Labour Party.
Yeah, they got paid off twice, didn't they, really?
Yeah, they did.
Okay, we've got a question from Jean Watson who asks, do Unite community members get a vote? I assume this is in the contest for General Secretary. Do you want to just sort of lead people through the process a bit of this election?
So Unite community members do get a vote, but the process that we are contesting at the moment, myself and Steve are contesting, is the United Left process. So if you are in the United Left, then you're part of the decision making as to who should be the United Left candidate going forward. Sometimes that's difficult for the wider membership to understand, and sometimes they don't know how to get involved in the United Left, and where is it and who do you apply to. And the idea is that this is a left caucus that is industrial and also based in the community, and that it is full of leaders and shop stewards and reps. That's the intention of it. It is not the wider electorate that we are going to on Saturday. It is those who are in the United Left, who are in the United Left as at the 28th of March. And the reason for that, Kerry, the reason why I put my name forward for that is because, first of all, I believe in left unity. I do believe in the strength of a left-lay structure and what it can do. Without a left-lay structure, whenever I was in the West Midlands, it would have been a very difficult time for me, but I had the left-lay structures to call upon whenever I was tackling the likes of Watson, Speller, and others who were still around, and whenever I needed support in respect to the Birmingham Bins dispute. So I understand that structure needs to be nourished and grow within the union, but I also understand that left unity is absolutely vital. And if we end up with 2 or even 3 left people on a ballot paper, then you're frankly opening the door, taking your chances, flicking a coin as to whether or not the union ends up in the hands of the right wing. And if the union ends up in the hands of the right wing, then the person who put in the question, who's obviously a community member and knows the value of uniting community, I can tell you now that the right wing will not be promoting Unite community membership. So it's vitally important that we keep the union in the hands of the left.
Absolutely. And so let's say we get our way, Howard, and come Saturday, you've secured the nomination of United Left. What happens next?
Well, obviously, Len has said that there will be an election sometime in 2021, and it is Len's timetable to dictate, and rightly so. And I would imagine that Len has an awful lot of thoughts going through his head at the moment. Nobody expected this crisis, and he will feel, knowing the man, I know that he will feel an obligation to work himself to the bone for our members in a time of crisis. And obviously, you're dealing with, an enormous giant within our movement, somebody whose wisdom I daily am blown away by. And at this moment in time, these are the leaders that our unions need. We need people who can steer us through this. So I think a large part of Len's thinking will be upon the crisis and what should happen. But nevertheless, he thinks it's right for there to be one left candidate and for people to know who that one left candidate is. And obviously, myself and my friend Steve are putting our names forward and asking people to make their choices.
Fantastic. And for people watching who want to support you, they want to be able to make some impact on an election, on hustings coming up on Saturday that they're not going to necessarily be able to vote in. How can they agitate on your behalf and their behalf to make sure that you become that candidate?
Well, if they know anybody in the United Left, then please have a word with them and tell them why you prefer my candidacy. And other than that, obviously, every solidarity is fantastic. Please follow me on the Twitter account at Unite Beckett, I think it is, and on Facebook as well. There's endorsement videos on there. There's manifestos on there. Please retweet them. Please be vocal with your comrades. And as I say, if you know anybody who for certain is in the United Left in your region, then please tell them why you think that my candidacy is the one to be supported.
So there you go, people. Get and identify your United Left folks in your regions and just make noise, because even if you aren't in direct contact with people, people will be watching, who is making the most noise, who has got the appetite and the demand of the left and beyond at the moment. And certainly I know in my, experience, I'm talking to people about this, and, the name is Howard Beckett, that is the way the left is leaning. That, it's not to blow smoke up you, it just is the way that it is. And as much as, you're a lovely bloke personally, it isn't about that. It's about your record. It's about this manifesto and the commitments within it. And when you've got someone who has a track record of delivery and they make commitments like this, it gets really exciting, because you think, well, we're just a hop, skip and a jump from these things happening now. And it's just a matter of enabling you to get that stuff done on behalf of all of us and in concert with all of us. So I guess I'll just wind up now on a note, which I think we'll probably start quite dark, but we'll try and end it a bit more positively, because it looks like we really are about to go into a winter of discontent here in the UK and perhaps potentially around the world. We have an economic system in crisis, and nobody's willing to change it who has the power to change it right now. We've got, over 600,000 new unemployed people that were just released today. That's before, the real economic crisis of this thing has even started. Later this year, we're likely to have a second spike of coronavirus at the same time as we're going to have seasonal flu. There is going to be a world of pain, meted out really against the most vulnerable people in our communities. What is the role of Unite in that context? Why should people be becoming members of Unite now, ahead of time?
Well, to give people a voice and to give them influence in society, Kerry, we cannot have the narrative the way it is at the moment. We can't allow this no alternative to win. We can't have working people pay for this crisis. Not we didn't cause this crisis, and we shouldn't pay for this crisis. And it is, I think I said it earlier in the interview, it is by way of numbers that Unite carries its influence. We are a wealthy union. We can afford to lose finances in this crisis and still come out the other side. But we have to be the voice for working people. We have to be the voice for our communities to say that there are alternatives. You're quite right to identify that we do not have the world leaders at the moment. They are not in place. In the 2008 crash, we had Gordon Brown and we had Barack Obama. And say what you want about either of them and their failings, of which there was many. They were head and shoulders above the current encompasses of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. And that is a problem. Because if you had world leaders, you would be talking about parking world debt right now. You would be saying there will be a halt to this position. No one country will take an advantage of another country in this moment of crisis. And we will effectively use world money to get us through this, this pandemic. But right here and now, the responsibility for the unions and as a consequence, the responsibility for the movement is to make sure that the alternative is being talked about, that people understand the debt that is created during such a moment of crisis can be parked as wartime debt. That people understand that borrowing money in a time of crisis is not an evil, it is a necessity, and money is extraordinarily cheap. That people understand that if you're made redundant and you have to claim in the welfare state and industries shut, then coming out of this crisis will take much longer and will cause much more deaths than otherwise. That people understand that the use of state money in order to intervene in respect of businesses should never now be considered ideological. It is absolutely essential that it happens now in order to safeguard jobs, that people talk of a shorter working week, that they talk of job sharing, that they talk about electrifying trams around every city, that they talk about electric cars, they talk about electric planes to save our regional airports, that we embrace a green industrial revolution in a way that we have simply failed to do up to now, and that we do build council houses. They have to be built with solar energy. This is the coherence of an industrial agenda that would get us through this crisis and see us to the other end. And it isn't fantasy land. It is happening elsewhere. You only have to look at other countries with massive investment. And it's happening in Norway, obviously. So there is alternatives for us to look to say that a society can be rebuilt and working people do not have to pay for it. And above all, and I suppose if it was a singular message that I'd be given to the Labour Party, can you please start talking about wealth taxes? Can you start talking about them now? People cannot have millions of pounds in this country while working class people are losing their jobs. It is morally wrong, and you're a party for workers. So please stand up and be proud to say that there must be wealth taxes.
Thank you so much, Howard. I mean, I'm conscious that we've overrun by like 10 minutes here, but we have just had a last minute question come in. Would you be okay to have a last question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much. This is from Cal Alexander Rosser, who asks, how does Howard feel about a job guarantee scheme versus universal basic income?
Well, that's a very good question, really. I would, my instinct would always be driven towards a problem. I don't know really, Kerry. It's a very good question. I'm undecided on that. The problem with job guarantee scheme is that there's almost this preconception that it means everybody is able to work, and of course everybody is not able to work. And obviously, a minimum income is one that is instinctively draws to politics of myself to say there must be minimum income. But I don't want to give a message that belittles the importance of society, saying jobs must be made available. And the problem whenever you have a question like that talks about things as if they're competing ideologies, it's as if you're giving up on jobs in respect of universal benefits credits. The reality for me right now is that that question becomes even more difficult because of the failings of the job retention scheme, because obviously the job retention scheme at the moment is one where I'm very keen for Labour to be given a narrative that says it is failing, but also a narrative that says that it can be successful if you reverse out the changes of August, September, October, November. Then you can be successful if you move it into 2021. It can be a sector-based scheme in 2021, and it can look to job sharing, and it can look to shorter working weeks. So I would simply say that in this climate, that question is difficult to answer, because I wouldn't want to say one against the other. I want to see jobs. I want to see people available for jobs, but I also want to make sure that those who cannot work have an income that they can afford to live on. And I want to see an end to in-work poverty. So the answer is more complicated than one or the other for me, Kerry.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. I think a lot of this stuff happens. We've had a similar debate that we've seen play out about stay in the Labour Party and fight, or get out of the Labour Party and do something else. And I've answered that question very similarly to the way you've answered this question, which is these things are not mutually exclusive. There are lots of us, and we should be fighting every way that we know how to fight that best fits with our energy, our skills, our passion. And for some people, that's going to be inside the Labour Party. With other people, it's going to be in the trade union movement. With other people, it's going to be street activism and protest. And these are things that are, they're almost like different instruments in an orchestra. And I think you need all of them playing at maximum volume in order for us to really make maximum change.
You do, and putting one policy against another policy, sometimes this simply doesn't work. But I will say this: stay and fight is definitely my position at the moment. Is stay and fight in the Labour Party. But whenever I say fight, I do mean that. I mean that we need something for we need something for what we give to the Labour Party. We need things back, and that's the responsibility now for the leadership, is to show that they are listening to the left of the party. As well as listening to the right of the party, and come back to us. Kerry, can I take your indulgence for just 2 seconds, if that's okay?
Yeah.
There's before I came on to this program, there's a couple of things. Before I came on to this program, I was reminded that it's the 4th anniversary of the death of Davy Hopper, who was a giant in the trade union movement and a life to be celebrated. But more sadly than that, Kerry, I got tremendously sad news that one of our members committed suicide in British Airways today. And now British Airways sent out their fire and rehire letters last night.
Oh my God.
I don't know if it's entirely fair for me to relate one to the other, but it is fair for me to say that working people in this at this moment in time are going through extraordinary difficulties and traumas and mental stress, and they are struggling to see where there's an end to this. We need employers who understand people as much as they understand economics, and we need government and we need political parties who understand people as much as they understand economics. There are real lives at stake here. And sadly, tonight we lost one. We lost a Unite member who took their own life. And for me personally, the circumstances that we're currently in have to have contributed to that. Yeah. And I would just ask if there's any employers out there who's thinking this man is a big bad evil, just think to yourself that every individual who you employ is a human being who has a family, has responsibilities, and wants the best for themselves in life. Please just take a step back and think about the social and human consequences of your actions before you take them.
Thank you so much, Howard. Really, and I'd just like to pay my respects to this person and their loved ones and their entire community that's going to be affected by this. Mental health is something that we need to be, discussing, I think, more and taking action on more in the left. I know that's beginning to happen, but it can't move quickly enough, particularly at times like this, where, as you say, people are being hit from everything that could give you a mental health crisis is all happening at the same time right now to millions of people simultaneously, which not only means there's a lot of people suffering, but it also means it diminishes the chances of other people being able to help directly because they're going through their own stuff, trying to keep their own ship afloat. And that's why collectivism is so important. It's that we do lean on each other in crisis.
Yeah.
And those are principles to stand behind, to be proud of. So thank you so much, Howard. I just want to remind people again, if you know anyone in the United Left, get hitting up, blow up their phones, get on social media, make a big load of noise for this man, because he has and will continue to make a big load of noise for us as working class people. And then we've got a whole year that we can get behind Howard and make sure that he is General Secretary of Unite when that glorious man Len McCluskey has to finally step down and go about the rest of his business. Howard, did you have anything else to leave our audience with before we go tonight?
No, thank you, Kerry. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great to talk to you, and long may Media Challenge such as yourself grow and prosper and offer a voice to working people. So thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much, and good luck for Saturday.
Thank you. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And you. Bye-bye.